The New England Patriots are going to be taking on the Philadelphia Eagles this Thursday. This game is going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Now, the New England Patriots, in their last preseason game, they defeated the Washington football team 22-13, and the Philadelphia Eagles lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers 24-16. Now, in this game, the first thing that I'm going to be looking at is quarterback Jalen Hurts for Philadelphia. Now, Jalen Hurts finished the game against Pittsburgh 3 of 7 passing for 54 passing yards. I don't feel like he played bad. I felt like he played fairly solid. Now, I think that this is a really important preseason game for him, but for a confidence standpoint, because we don't have 4 preseason games anymore. We only have 3. The NFL changed that a year ago. The only teams that are going to be playing in 4 preseason games are the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers, because they played in the Hall of Fame game. So I think that this is a really important preseason game for Jalen Hurts for a confidence standpoint, because if he comes out here and he plays well, then depending on how the coaching staff feels about him going into week 3, we could see him not play and prepare for the start of the regular season. So I think that is really important for Jalen Hurts to get off to a really good start in this preseason matchup, to build that confidence as we inch closer to the start of the regular season. Now, when you look at Jalen Hurts, the wide receiver position is coming on along fairly nicely. That's another thing that I'm going to be watching, not just for Philadelphia, but for the New England Patriots as well. For the New England Patriots, we don't really know who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver. We know that Jacoby Myers is probably going to be that second option because he was their best wide receiver last year, and I still think that he's their best wide receiver currently on the team right now. But outside of Jacoby Myers, okay, who's going to be wide receiver 1, 3, and 4? Is it going to be N'Keal Harry? Heard a lot of good things about him during training camp. Is it going to be Nelson Agholor, Kendrick Bourne? We don't really know. So I'm going to be looking at all of the wide receivers for New England in this game. And most of the wide receivers for New England have been pretty solid. Then you have Philadelphia on the other hand. A lot of people feel like Philadelphia doesn't have that much talent at wide receiver. I disagree with that statement. They have a lot of youth, and they do have talent. The thing is, that talent just needs to be coached up fairly well, and they need to be groomed. You have Quez Watkins, who had a big preseason touchdown last week against Pittsburgh. It was like a screen pass from Joe Flacco that he took 79 yards to the house. He pretty much burnt everybody on the Steelers defense. So you look at him. I'm going to be keeping my eye on Devontae Smith, that he's able to play in this game. Now, he's listed as day-to-day. Hopefully he plays in this game, crossing my fingers, because I'm expecting a lot of big things out of Devontae Smith, and I at least want to see Devontae Smith play in 1 preseason game before the regular season, because I think this is going to help him out a lot. Like, for a rookie who doesn't play in a preseason game, you just thrown into, a regular season game. I think that the preseason kind of gives you like a feel for the NFL game, kind of, gives you opportunity to fill out everything that's going on versus, just not having the preseason, just being thrown into regular season action. You kind of struggle with the change of speed in the game, because in the preseason, players aren't going 100%, but the game is still a little bit more sped up than what it was compared to college. Therefore, you get a little bit acclimated to the speed of the preseason, and that makes the transition into the regular season, when things are going 110% at full speed, it makes the transition a little bit better. So I hope that Devontae Smith is able to play in this game. He's listed as day-to-day. Now, for the other wide receivers, like I mentioned earlier, Quez Watkins, I was impressed with the big touchdown that he had. I'm also looking at the other wide receivers that they have. Jalen Reagor, what is he going to play? Is he going to play slot, or is Philadelphia going to use him as a outside wide receiver? Okay, you also got Greg Ward Jr. We already know about Travis Fulgham. He was pretty much the best, most reliable option that they had at wide receiver last year. But Philadelphia has a lot of young talent on this roster when it comes to the wide receiver position. They just need to be coached up well, and they need to be groomed. And I think that the coaching staff of Philadelphia has a lot of confidence in this group going into the year. Now, for New England, everybody's going to be having their eyes on Mac Jones. Mac Jones was really impressive last week. He completed 13 out of 19 of his passes for 87 passing yards against Washington. And I already made a video talking about my thoughts on Mac Jones' first preseason game. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. But basically everything that has been raved about Mac Jones during training camp and during the OTAs and minicamp, we saw on full display last week against Washington. He was accurate. He made good decisions. He had good anticipation. He was throwing guys open. Pretty much as soon as guys started breaking on their routes, the ball was there. And he had a couple of drop touchdowns that if they were caught, then that probably would have made people feel a hell of a lot more confident in him. And I'm still a little bit upset that people in the media still keep taking shots at Mac Jones. Like, I don't know why people just continue to hate on Mac Jones. Well, I know why people are hating on Mac Jones. It's because Mac Jones isn't flashy. He doesn't have the big frame like a Trey Lance or the athleticism of a Lance or a Justin Fields. But I just feel like a lot of people need to truly understand what makes Mac Jones special. He may not have the greatest arm. He may not be the greatest athlete. But one thing about Mac Jones for sure is that he's really intelligent. He has a high football IQ. And we normally see players who aren't really the most physically gifted make up for their lack of it due to their preparation in the game. So when you look at Mac Jones, I want to see how he performs against Philadelphia, because you look at Philadelphia, I think this definitely could be another great performance for Mac Jones brewing, because Philadelphia doesn't really have a great secondary when it comes to their depth. Outside of Zach McPherson, I don't really trust the other cornerbacks on this Philadelphia Eagles roster. So if you're an Eagles fan and God forbid Steven Nelson or Darius Slay goes down, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, at least you have Zach McPherson. I mean, he has probably been the best cornerback on the Eagles roster, not named Steven Nelson or Darius Slay. And I definitely feel like he can have a really impactful rookie season on this team. But outside of him, the depth at cornerback is incredibly thin for Philadelphia. And this secondary is going to get tested going against a wide receiving core for New England that has a lot of talent there. Now, New England may not have any big name stars at the wide receiver position, but you definitely have guys who are more than capable of being able to go out there and get the job done. Now, how will the linebacking core for Philadelphia perform in this game? If you're an Eagles fan, you're definitely going to have a good indication of how far along you are in terms of the linebacker position, because New England gouged the Washington's run defense last week. Like, Washington's run defense had no answer for Rhamondre Stevenson, who had 127 rushing yards and 2 carries. And remind you that he didn't even start the game out. Like, he was still splitting a lot of carries with Damian Harris and the other backs that the Patriots have on their roster. And this guy stood out. So for Philadelphia, if you're an Eagles fan and you want to know just how good your linebackers are going to be this year, this game could be a precursor to the performance that your linebacker core could have this year. And we know that Philadelphia's linebacker position hasn't really been that great over the last couple of seasons. As a matter of fact, they have had one of the worst linebacker positions in the NFL for over the last 3-4 years. So definitely this is a big game for these linebackers in this game in determining how far along they are, because they're going to get tested against New England, because New England is probably going to run the football a lot, because they had a lot of success running the football against Washington. Now, for Philadelphia, I still don't really know who's going to be the wide receiver 2, 3, 4. We know Devontae Smith is going to be their number 1 wide receiver, because obviously you drafted them in the first round for a reason. So whenever he comes back fully healthy, we know he's going to be their number 1. Now, Travis Fulgham probably is going to be their number 2, but still don't know who's going to be playing slot, who's going to be the 4th, 5th option. I'm thinking that Jalen Reagor is probably going to be in that slot role. Maybe I've heard some Eagles fans say that they think that Jalen Reagor would make a pretty good slot receiver. I like him better in the slot myself. But what about Greg Ward Jr.? I'm looking at the other wide receivers that they have that need to be making their presence felt in this game. Now, my players to watch for the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to be keeping my eyes out on Jalen Hurts. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a really big preseason game for him from a confidence standpoint, and pretty much we know he's going to be the starter, but giving the coaching staff more confidence in him. Then you got Devontae Smith. Hopefully he plays in this game. You got cornerback Zach McPherson, who has been the third best cornerback on this roster. He's been the best cornerback that has been on the field for the Eagles during the preseason so far. And outside of him, man, Philadelphia doesn't really have anybody else who you could feel confident in. Then you have wide receiver Quez Watkins, who had a 79-yard touchdown reception off a screen pass from Joe Flacco against Pittsburgh. Then on top of that, I'm not going to be keeping my eyes out on Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco looked really impressive last week against Pittsburgh. Got to give some kudos out to him. Now, my players to watch for the New England Patriots. Running back Rhamondre Stevenson, man, like this guy is a freight train, and nobody really has been talking about him. Like we've just been talking about Sony Michel and Damian Harris, but Rhamondre Stevenson, if he puts together another good preseason performance, maybe he could have a little bit of say-so in terms of that running back rotation for New England this year. And it's really impressive what he did last week, because he only did this on 10 carries. So his yards per carry average was off the freaking chains. And he had 2 touchdowns as well, along with pretty much having, the touchdown to end the game against Washington. So for Rhamondre Stevenson, man, I want to see if he's going to be able to keep it up. Safety Kyle Dugger. Kyle Dugger did get a good amount of action last week. I like what I saw out of him. Still looking for more out of him. Hopefully he gets implemented a little bit more this year in the Patriots defense than what he did last year. Coming out of college, he was known as like a versatile safety, similar to Jeremy Chinn. You can line him up at safety, or he can play like a linebacker in certain formations, rather that be nickel or dime. So I want to see more Kyle Dugger. Then I'm looking at wide receiver Christian Wilkerson, who had 6 catches for 39 receiving yards last week. He had a pretty nice game, even though he did have like a drop touchdown that Mac Jones put beautiful dot, and he just let it slip through his hands. So he has been pretty impressive, and he's been getting talked about a lot during training camp for the New England Patriots. So this is it for my New England Patriots versus Philadelphia Eagles preseason preview. Let me know some players that you're going to be watching down below. What are some positions that you're going to be keeping your eyes out in this game?